They say time puts everyone in their place, but when someone wounds us deeply, it's hard to believe that. Waiting for justice can feel like a punishment in itself. Some people sleep peacefully after causing pain, while others carry the wound every night. Yet the world doesn't forget, and neither does the conscience. Every action leaves a mark, visible or invisible, and life's balance eventually evens things out. But what if that balance is already shifting before your eyes, and you just haven't noticed yet? We've all felt the need to see destiny settle its accounts, not out of revenge, but for peace of mind. Some people hurt, lie, or manipulate, and it seems like life rewards them. But calm never lasts. Karma, or as the ancient Stoics called it, the natural justice of the universe, doesn't move with anger, but with precision. It doesn't punish, it teaches. It doesn't seek suffering, it seeks to restore order. And that order, according to the wise, manifests here and now, in this life, on the very stage where the harm was done. This video is a journey to recognize the signs that this process has already begun, and to understand what role your own serenity plays in it all. If this is your first time here, my name is Gabriel. I share this space to offer practical wisdom that helps protect your peace and dignity, even when others refuse to change. Today, I invite you to stay until the end, because beyond the 8 signs of karma, you'll discover the 4 Stoic virtues that will allow you to live free of debts, with life and with yourself. Let's begin. Since ancient times, humanity has tried to understand why harm seems to return disguised as fate. The Greek sages, Eastern masters, and Stoic philosophers all agreed on the same law. Every action generates a reaction, not by magic, but by balance. They imagined life as a perfect circle where nothing is lost, only transformed and returned. They called it natural justice, harmony, or karma, depending on the culture, but they all spoke of the same thing: consequence. No one escapes themselves or what they have sown. The curious thing is that punishment doesn't come from the heavens or from others, it comes from within. Every time someone lies, betrays, or causes harm, they leave a crack in their own structure. It may take a long time for that crack to show, but it always ends up revealing their fragility. Even those who seem invincible begin to break from the inside. It's like throwing a stone into a lake. The ripples travel outward, but inevitably return to their source. That is the nature of karma, a force that never forgets, even if it takes its time. The ancients said the universe doesn't punish, it reflects. If you act with cruelty, you'll face situations that force you to understand the pain you caused. And if you act with kindness, life will show its gratitude in the form of peace. That's why Epictetus insisted there is no greater misfortune than being unjust, because whoever harms others wounds themselves first. The law of cause and effect makes no distinction of status or appearance. It's a silent teacher that we all, sooner or later, must listen to. So far, we've spoken about the invisible principle that sustains balance, but there are also visible signs, traces that show this law is already in motion, that the circle is closing. And what's most fascinating is that although we often wish to witness the downfall of those who hurt us, true power lies in recognizing the signs without losing your calm, understanding that the universe works quietly and without our interference. In the coming chapters, you'll discover those signs one by one. But before we dive into them, I want to leave you with one thought. Karma is not an enemy or a form of revenge. It's an opportunity. It's how life clears what's out of place so the soul can keep growing. Understanding this changes everything because it frees you from the need to monitor someone else's destiny and brings your focus back to your own path. Those who sow peace reap serenity. Those who sow harm reap restlessness. It's that simple. That's why the clearest sign of spiritual maturity isn't seeing someone else fall. It's realizing you no longer care if they do. Because when you stop craving justice, it means you're already at peace, and karma, silently, begins to do its work. And indeed, the first sign of that invisible process begins with the loss of something few can hide: calm. There's something that sooner or later becomes evident in those who've caused harm. Peace slips away from them. They can fake a smile, success, or strength, but inside, there's a tremor that won't quiet down. They don't sleep the same, they don't enjoy things the same, they don't trust the same. Sometimes that emptiness hides behind fatigue or stress, but what's really happening is that the conscience begins to awaken, and once it does, it doesn't let you rest. The Stoics said the worst prison wasn't of the body, but of the restless soul, the one that remembers, even when the ego tries to forget. I remember an old story I once heard in a monastery. A merchant had cheated a partner and grown rich from his loss. For years, no one found out, but every night he dreamt of the same scene, the defrauded man's hands reaching out in silence. He tried to distract himself with more money, travel, and pleasure, but nothing quieted his mind. One day he realized his insomnia wasn't divine punishment. It was the echo of his own dishonesty. In that moment, he understood that karma's true payment isn't external, but internal, in the loss of rest. So far, we've seen that karma doesn't need witnesses. It works from the unseen. And when it does, the first symptom is unease. Those who have caused harm live with a kind of inner noise that follows them, even when everything around them seems fine. It's a restlessness that neither luxury nor company can soothe. The mind begins to accuse the heart, and the heart responds with memories it wanted to erase. The result is constant emotional wear, a formless weight that makes it impossible to enjoy what one has. The Stoic sages taught that only those who live in harmony with their conscience can truly sleep in peace. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations that tranquility doesn't depend on outer silence, but on having nothing to hide. Those who act with virtue can close their eyes peacefully, but those who lie or harm others, even when they sleep, find no rest. And that, though invisible, is one of the most powerful signs that balance is collecting its debt. The loss of calm is the soul's first invoice. There is no greater punishment than remorse because you cannot escape it. You can flee from a person, a place, or an uncomfortable conversation, but you cannot flee from yourself. And when that moment comes, karma no longer needs to intervene. It's enough to let conscience do its work. The wise response to this isn't to rejoice in another's discomfort, but to learn. To learn that inner peace is the greatest treasure, and keeping it clean is the best shield against any debt with life. Because everything stolen is eventually lost, and all harm sown returns as sleepless nights. In the next section, we'll explore an even more visible sign, when everything in their life starts to unravel as if life itself were teaching them what they once refused to see. There comes a moment when the pieces stop fitting together for those who acted without conscience. What once came easily begins to stall. Plans get delayed, projects collapse, things just stop flowing. It's no coincidence. When the mind is filled with guilt or ego, the energy that moves the world around you becomes chaotic. The ancients said, karma doesn't always appear as visible punishment, but as a chain of obstacles that force you to look within. That's when life starts showing, again and again, that the control they thought they had was only an illusion. I've often seen people who believed they had everything under control suddenly enter a time when nothing works. They lose friendships, face conflicts at work, deal with illness, or simply feel as if luck has turned its back on them. And while from the outside it may look like a streak of bad luck, it's actually a realignment. The universe moves its pieces so that those who acted without integrity experience what they once caused in others: frustration, exhaustion, helplessness, not as punishment but as a lesson. Balance reorders itself, but in its own time. So far, we've understood that the first sign of karma is the loss of inner peace, and once that calm disappears, the next stage is outer chaos. It's as if life begins to mirror outwardly what's already broken inside. The Stoics interpreted this with serenity. There's no chaos that doesn't serve wisdom. When things get complicated, nature is simply trying to bring each person back to the center of their path. Difficulty is life's clearest way of saying, there's something here you need to see. Marcus Aurelius wrote that what stands in the way becomes the way. That phrase captures the essence of karma. The obstacle isn't revenge, it's guidance. But those who don't understand that fight the current, blame others, get angry, and the more they resist, the more they get stuck. And there lies the lesson: karma doesn't destroy, it re-educates. What seems like loss is, in truth, an invitation to face what one refused to see when everything was going well. Someone who hurt you may try to go on with their life, but if the signs are in motion, they'll begin to experience a chain of situations that force them to confront themselves. That's the great difference between human punishment and natural order. The first seeks pain. The second seeks awareness. And that awareness comes when life becomes so complicated that there's nowhere left to run from who you really are. What we can learn from this is simple yet profound. There's no need to wish for life to settle the score. It does so on its own. Meanwhile, our job is to stay calm and not contaminate ourselves with the same energy we hope others will face. Because when we wait for someone else's fall, we unknowingly bind ourselves to the same circle. True power lies in letting go and trusting the natural balance of things. And if you're finding value in this message, I invite you to do something: subscribe, leave a like, and tell me your name and which country you're watching from. I always read the comments and love seeing how this community keeps growing. You can also share another sign you've noticed when life starts collecting its debt, so we can keep learning together. Now let's move on to one of the clearest signs of karma. When those who acted with harm start losing their allies, and loneliness, quietly and without warning, shows them their own reflection. There comes a stage when karma no longer needs to act from the unseen. It's when those who lived with selfishness or cruelty begin to find themselves alone. Not because others punish them, but because time gradually reveals their true nature. Superficial connections dissolve, accomplices disappear, admirers drift away. Loneliness becomes an uncomfortable mirror reflecting the harvest of years past. Sometimes it arrives as indifference, other times as abandonment, but it always carries the same message. Everything built on falsehood eventually collapses under its own weight. I remember a symbolic story once told by the wise. A queen ruled with harshness and feared losing her throne. She surrounded herself with flatterers who praised her in public but despised her in secret. When the day came that she lost her power, none remained by her side. In her empty castle, she realized she'd never had allies, only interests. That image, though ancient, still repeats itself today. People who spent years manipulating, lying, or hurting others eventually discover that what seemed like admiration was never love, only convenience. And karma ensures they learn that lesson once there's no one left to cling to. Up to this point, we've seen how the loss of calm and outer disorder mark the first signs of natural correction. But loneliness is different. It isn't imposed, it's revealed. The soul begins to reap what it sowed in relationships. The Stoics believed there was no greater wealth than friendship rooted in virtue. That's why, when a person strays from justice, their circle falls apart as well, not because others judge them, but because kindred souls no longer resonate with their frequency. Seneca said that no power is worth anything if it isn't supported by genuine love. That phrase sums up this point perfectly. Loneliness isn't punishment. It's the natural result of a lack of virtue. Those who used others for personal gain eventually learn that manipulation doesn't build bonds, only fragile dependencies. And when life withdraws those supports, all that's left is the echo of emptiness. Here karma acts with quiet elegance. It needs no revenge, no public humiliation. Time alone is enough to remove the masks. And when that happens, the person who once seemed invincible realizes their strength depended entirely on others. That's when pride begins to crack, and in that silence, their true learning begins. For us, observing from the outside, this sign shouldn't spark pleasure or revenge. It should remind us of the importance of caring for our relationships, of acting with justice and honesty so we don't reap loneliness where we could have sown genuine affection. Because life, sooner or later, returns companionship to those who offered it from the heart and silence to those who sowed manipulation. And along those same lines, there's an even more inevitable sign, when time itself brings to light what once seemed buried. Let's talk about how truth always finds its way, even when it seems impossible. Nothing stays hidden forever. That phrase, often repeated by the ancients, holds one of karma's most unshakable laws. A lie can be sustained for a while, even for years, but the strain of maintaining it eventually betrays the one who told it. Sooner or later, the pieces stop fitting, the details contradict each other, and truth, patient but relentless, begins to make its way through. It doesn't arrive with noise, but with precision. Sometimes a coincidence, an innocent comment, or a small mistake is enough for everything to be revealed. Imagine someone who built their image on deceit and appearances. For years they may seem convincing, but life always seeks balance. One day, without warning, something breaks, a misplaced word, a wrongly sent message, a gesture that reveals what was meant to stay hidden. And that's when the adjustment happens. No witnesses are needed. Truth handles its own unveiling. What's fascinating is that this revelation isn't always public. Sometimes it happens quietly, inside the one who lied, when guilt and fear become their own judge. Up to this point, we've seen how karma strips away peace, disrupts life, and leaves people without allies. But its most refined lesson comes when it exposes what was concealed. The Stoics saw this as a law of transparency. To live in accordance with nature is to live without masks. Marcus Aurelius warned that the soul withers when it separates from truth, because every lie distances it from its essence. And when that happens, the universe somehow steps in to restore balance. I've known people who tried to defame, steal, or manipulate, and for a time, they seemed to get away with it. But time, with its wise slowness, eventually revealed their actions, sometimes through a careless mistake, other times through the voice of someone who grew tired of silence. When that happens, the result isn't punishment, but balance. Truth doesn't humiliate, it purifies. It forces the person to face what they denied and to deal with the consequences, either with humility or resistance, depending on the maturity of their soul. For those who've been hurt, this sign can be the most anticipated. Seeing life unmask what was hidden brings a mix of relief and sadness. Relief for natural justice, sadness because there's always a cost. But when you observe it calmly, you realize something deeper. You don't need to push for revelation, only to trust that everything done in darkness will eventually be brought to light. Seneca said that truth may be slow, but it is never absent, and that certainty alone is enough to bring peace. There's no need to watch, to prove, or to expose. Life reveals what each person truly is. So when you notice that something is beginning to surface, don't see it as revenge, but as the universe's way of cleansing itself. What was distorted returns to its rightful place, and with it, peace finds its way back too. Next, we'll explore another manifestation of this balance, when recognition begins to slip away from those who once believed their success could shield them from the weight of their actions. There's a kind of emptiness that no applause can fill, the one that appears when success isn't built on truth. Many people who acted with harm or injustice manage for a while to appear triumphant. They have money, admiration, or influence. But karma doesn't measure in numbers, it measures in integrity, and when that's missing, the shine fades. They may remain visible, but their gaze loses its spark, their voice grows weary, and what was once celebration becomes routine. The soul always knows when gratitude is false and when success wasn't earned honestly. The Stoics said that external recognition is nothing but smoke if it isn't grounded in virtue. Seneca warned that the most dangerous thing for the soul is to succeed without deserving it, because the price always comes later. And that's exactly what happens. Those who base their worth on others' admiration eventually discover how fragile applause really is. Today it's there, tomorrow it's gone. Life makes sure they understand that the only lasting fame is a clear conscience. Up to this point, we've seen how truth comes to light and strips away what once seemed unshakable. What follows is subtler. Recognition begins to fade. The praise that once came easily starts to dwindle, opportunities cool off, and people stop admiring what they once praised. Karma doesn't take away material things, it takes away meaning. It's life's elegant way of showing that what was built in the shadows was never truly solid. Think of a tree that grew crooked but still managed to bloom. From the outside, it looks strong, full of leaves, but over time, the weight of its own shape brings it down. The same happens to those who built their lives on ego. They may seem stable, but a twisted root eventually cracks the trunk. And when that happens, life doesn't destroy them. It simply stops holding them up. The soul then feels a deep exhaustion, realizing that nothing achieved tastes real anymore. What's interesting is that this kind of lesson isn't always visible from the outside. A person may keep smiling, keep their job or their status, but deep down, they know recognition no longer satisfies them, that something essential has been lost. And that, at its core, is karma's most silent repayment, taking away the value of what once seemed indispensable. Those who understand this sign with serenity don't wish for another's downfall. They wish for their awakening, because the suffering that comes from emptiness is what opens the door to change. And there lies the lesson for us as well, not to seek recognition, but coherence. The only thing that never fades is the peace of knowing you did the right thing, even if no one sees it. In the next chapter, we'll talk about one of the most fair and powerful signs of universal balance, when life makes those who caused pain experience in their own flesh the very suffering they once inflicted on others. This is the most moving sign, and the one that carries the deepest sense of justice. There comes a point when life gives each person the same experience they once caused in others, not as revenge, but as a lesson. That's when the one who humiliated is humiliated, the one who ignored is ignored, and the one who betrayed ends up being betrayed. Karma doesn't seek to destroy, it seeks to teach through experience. What wasn't understood through empathy is now understood through pain. And though it may seem harsh, it's an act of wisdom at its core. The universe repeats the lesson until the soul finally learns it. I've known people who denied for years the harm they caused until life placed them in the very position they once despised. A controlling father who ends up being ignored by his grown children, an unfaithful partner who later suffers betrayal, a boss who humiliated others and eventually feels the sting of contempt. It's not magic or divine punishment. It's coherence. Everything we project comes back, as if the world itself were holding up the mirror we once broke. Up to now, we've seen how karma first takes away peace, then order, then allies, and finally, meaning. But this sign is more visceral. It's the moment when experience becomes the teacher. The Stoics called it natural reciprocity, the perfect cycle in which harm doesn't disappear, but transforms into understanding. Because only those who have felt in themselves what they once caused in others can truly grow. The paradox is that this lesson often arrives when the person believes the worst is already behind them. Everything seems stable, and suddenly life makes them live exactly what they once made someone else feel. That symmetry isn't always obvious at first, but with time, it becomes unmistakable. What we sow in others eventually blooms in our own story, and there's no escaping it, because it isn't an external punishment. It's an internal reflection. Marcus Aurelius said that nothing that happens to us is without purpose, and that every difficulty is the path back to reason. Seen through that lens, karma isn't an executioner, it's a guide. If a person can recognize their own reflection in what they're going through, then the lesson has fulfilled its purpose. If not, the story will repeat itself as many times as needed. Life never tires of teaching until consciousness awakens. For those watching from the outside, witnessing this kind of justice can be striking. But true wisdom lies not in taking pleasure, but in understanding. Another's suffering should never be a source of joy. It should be a quiet reminder of what we must all strive to avoid. Because if pain teaches some, compassion teaches others. In its noblest form, karma doesn't seek revenge, it seeks redemption. And it's precisely at that threshold where the next sign emerges, when those who caused harm begin to ask for forgiveness, but it's already too late to mend what's been broken. That's where the lesson reaches its most human point. There comes a moment when the person who caused harm begins to feel the weight of their own actions. Sometimes it takes years, even decades. But one day, conscience awakens and remorse surfaces. Yet time doesn't always offer second chances. Karma teaches that once certain boundaries have been crossed, you can't return to the same starting point. Some apologies arrive when the other person has already healed on their own, leaving no room to repair, only to acknowledge. And that may be one of life's hardest lessons, understanding that forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. I've seen cases where someone who once acted with coldness or disdain returns with a trembling voice, seeking redemption. They expect to find the other still waiting, but instead they're met with a closed door and a calm gaze that no longer needs them. That's where karma fulfills its final corrective role, teaching the value of time and awareness. Because asking for forgiveness is easy when the pain hurts the wrongdoer more than the victim. But life doesn't reward late words, only actions born from true understanding. So far, we've explored the most visible signs of universal balance: the loss of peace, disorder, loneliness, exposure, lack of recognition, and the reflection of one's own harm. This eighth sign is different. It doesn't reveal punishment, it reveals awareness. It's the moment when a person finally sees the damage they caused and understands what they once justified. But that clarity comes with a bitter taste, the impossibility of going back. Seneca said that true repentance doesn't seek comfort, it seeks change. Those who ask for forgiveness only to ease their guilt have understood nothing. Those who act to make amends, even without being forgiven, begin to purify themselves. And that's where karma transforms into a spiritual opportunity. Because even when outer doors close, the door to dignity always remains open from that moment onward. There's nothing sadder than an "I'm sorry" without action, and nothing braver than a silence that accepts responsibility. Sometimes true forgiveness isn't spoken, it happens in the soul, when you decide not to carry resentment anymore and let life take care of the rest. That choice is where freedom lies. Because while the other lives their lesson, you've already risen to another level, far from the cycle of harm and repayment. In its deepest form, karma isn't about punishment. It's about emotional and moral balance. And when that balance is restored, something shifts in both sides. The one who caused harm begins to seek meaning, and the one who suffered begins to seek understanding. That is the next and final sign. After remorse comes silence. No more excuses, no more masks, only an emptiness that pushes one to look inward. It's the moment when the person who caused harm, after watching their world fall apart, begins to wonder about the purpose of it all. Life, which once seemed like a series of external victories, reveals itself as an inner journey. That's where the search for meaning begins, the yearning to understand why they acted the way they did, and how to live in peace after so much imbalance. In its most compassionate phase, karma doesn't destroy, it awakens. Many sages said that when the soul hits rock bottom, it begins to remember who it truly is. Suffering, though no one seeks it, clears the vision. Through loss and guilt, a person begins to rediscover the values they once ignored: humility, temperance, gratitude. It's the moment when life is no longer measured by achievements, but by serenity. And though the process may be long, it's also the most fertile one. Pain, when properly understood, transforms into wisdom. Up to this point, we've seen how karma teaches through consequences, first through restlessness, then through disorder and loneliness, later through truth, loss, and the reflection of one's own harm. But in this final sign, the lesson becomes redemption. It's no longer the universe collecting, it's the soul awakening. It's when a human being begins to ask sincerely, what was the meaning of all this? What can I do with what I now know? Within those questions lies the seed of transformation. The Stoics believed that the purpose of every hardship is to lead us toward virtue. Marcus Aurelius said that no misfortune can destroy a person if they use it to grow stronger. Likewise, karma, after showing its harshness, offers its gift, the chance to begin again, but this time with awareness. When someone understands the harm they've caused and chooses to act differently, the debt dissolves. Not because it's forgotten, but because it's transformed into learning. What's most fascinating is that this search doesn't happen only in the one who caused harm, but also in the one who suffered it. True forgiveness often arises when both sides awaken at the same time, one through guilt, the other through understanding. And in that meeting point, the energy that was once broken finds reconciliation. That's where life proves that everything experienced, even the painful parts, had a purpose. This final sign of karma doesn't show punishment, it reveals maturity. It's the threshold of something greater, the conscious path toward inner freedom. Because if everything we do comes back, then everything we understand returns as well. And to live free of debts, fear, and guilt, the wise left us a simple yet profound guide, the 4 virtues that liberate the soul and close the karmic cycle. That's what we'll talk about next. When the soul has learned its lessons and balance has done its work, it's time to rebuild from a place of clarity. The ancient Stoics taught that the only way to live free from karma or any form of moral debt is to cultivate the virtues that bring order to the inner life. It's not about being perfect, but about being consistent. Because when you live according to virtue, life stops reflecting pain and begins to mirror peace. And those virtues, the sages said, are 4: wisdom, justice, temperance, and courage. 4 paths that, when embraced, close any unfinished circle. The first is wisdom. It's not intelligence or knowledge, it's discernment. It's learning to see what you once couldn't, to understand before judging, to listen before reacting. Those who cultivate wisdom don't repeat patterns because they've already understood the roots of suffering. This virtue cleanses the soul of resentment and turns experience into insight. Every mistake stops being a burden and becomes a teacher. In this way, the past no longer hurts, it begins to make sense. The second is justice. Not the justice of courts or pride, but the one born of inner fairness. To act with justice is to treat others with the same dignity you wish for yourself, even when no one is watching. Seneca said that justice is the root of all virtue, because those who act rightly can walk lightly. When justice guides our decisions, karma doesn't need to intervene. Balance sustains itself. The third is temperance. In a world that pushes excess of words of judgments, of desires, temperance is the art of restraint. It's choosing calm over reaction, silence over impulse, serenity over revenge. Marcus Aurelius said that mastering oneself is the greatest victory of all. Those who practice temperance create no emotional debt because they don't let the ego make their choices. This virtue protects peace, and peace is the clearest sign of inner freedom. And the fourth is courage, not the kind that seeks danger, but the kind that faces truth. To be courageous is to look at your own mistakes without excuses, to ask for forgiveness when needed, and to let go of what can no longer be repaired. Courage sustains all the other virtues, because without it, wisdom isn't applied, justice isn't defended, and temperance isn't maintained. It's the strength to live with an uncovered soul, unafraid of judgment or loss. These four virtues don't promise a life without pain, but they do promise a life free of lingering guilt. Those who live by them no longer fear karma because they understand its purpose. It's not about avoiding repayment, it's about no longer creating debt. And when that happens, the soul is free. A person no longer reacts from fear or resentment, but from awareness. They live lightly, in peace, knowing that what they give to the world is exactly what they'll receive. In that harmony, the lesson finds its closure. When you understand that everything returns, you choose to give only what you're willing to receive. That is the true justice of the universe. And with that certainty in your heart, it's time to close this journey. Grateful for what's been learned, and remembering that serenity, more than a destination, is a way of walking through life. The path we've walked today reminds us that nothing goes unanswered. Every action, every word, every gesture leaves its mark on the invisible fabric of life. Sometimes that echo takes time to return, but it always does. We've seen how karma doesn't punish, it teaches, how it first appears as the loss of peace, then through disorder, loneliness, exposure, loss of recognition, and the reflection of one's own harm. We've also understood that when repentance and the search for meaning arrive, the soul prepares to set itself free. And finally, that the four Stoic virtues, wisdom, justice, temperance, and courage, are the compass that keeps us far from moral debt and close to serenity. Thank you for making it this far. Thank you for allowing yourself to listen calmly, to reflect without hurry, and to stay with this journey until the end. It's not an easy topic because it confronts us with the truth that all of us at some point have stood on both sides of karma, the one who causes harm and the one who receives it. But that's what makes us human. Being here, sharing this search, is an act of courage and growth. Every time you choose to learn instead of resent, you take another step toward inner freedom. My name is Gabriel, and my purpose is to help you protect your peace and dignity, even when others refuse to change. That's the essence of this space, to find, amid the noise of the world, a place where reflection and serenity are possible. because the balance of the soul isn't achieved by correcting others, but by aligning our own hearts with truth and virtue. If this message resonated with you, I invite you to leave a comment sharing which country you're watching from. I love seeing where this community is growing from around the world. And if you want to seal what you've learned today, write this phrase: "What goes around, comes around." That statement sums up the spirit of this video: to trust that the universe never makes mistakes. Share it with someone who needs to let go of resentment or to understand that life's justice always arrives in its own time. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for continuing to grow. Up next, you'll see 2 videos on screen. Choose one and keep deepening your journey toward wisdom, dignity, and inner peace.